Good morning. Thank you very much.
That is not a good picture to me.
Okay.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Oh no, my mic isn't. Oh, now it is. I'll keep it down.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
She's a student.
Yeah.
Can I congratulate you? No, she's looking to go into social work.
We'll start at 10.
Okay, how you feeling?
I wanted people to come in. Yeah.
I got my cheat sheet.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Carl Hampton. I'm your Chief Diversity Officer, and happy Women's History Month. And so thank you all for coming here this morning. And we want to provide programming, especially diverse programming related to, we're very excited about our keynote speaker, but we want our interim provost, Colleen Six, to introduce Ms. Kendall before she starts. So thank you.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Colleen Sexton, currently serving as the interim provost here at Governor State University for about 2 more weeks, and we'll have Dr. Beverly Schneller with us beginning March 16th. So on behalf of the Provost Office and Academic Affairs, we welcome all of you to this event. And I'm actually very pleased that Carl asked me to introduce our keynote speaker here today, because as I was reflecting on Women's History Month, and in particular, Mikki's research in her areas of interest, I thought of when I was working on my doctorate many, many years ago, and I was asked to speak to a group of high school honors students. It was like a county-wide thing, and this is in rural Southeast Ohio. So my research was on women in science and creating a profile of which girls are more likely to go into science than others. And I did this presentation and I used all these like visual images and talked about all the, I don't know if any of you ever read Mary Field Belenki's work on a women's way of knowing, and, kind of talked about all that stuff. And then like a week later, someone came up to me, somebody's son that I knew, and said, "Did you talk to the honors kids?" And I'm like, "Yeah, and he said, 'Oh, my friend said you were the most sexist person going.'" And I was crushed. I was like, what? I was talking to these young women, but there was young men in the audience, about, the possibilities and why you could go into science and what that meant. And, you didn't have to choose careers that were limiting to young women at that time. And this is in the mid 80s. And then I shared the keynote with 2 of the teachers at the high school. And then they read it and they said, well, it's probably because you were also speaking to young men who thought if you work hard and you're this, you're going to get this. And then, so at the result of me empowering the young ladies in the audience, they were saying they felt like the young men felt like that meant they couldn't succeed. And it taught me a lesson like, next time I do this, it's not that it's keeping you from succeeding, but we need to make sure we open doors for others and make sure that everybody feels like they can go into fields that traditionally are not where our gender stereotypes go. So thank you for Carl asking me, because it just reminds me that, you know, as far as I think we've come in the last 30 years, we probably still have a lot of work to do. And so this event is a kickoff of Women's History Month with Mikki Kendall. And, you know, she's going to talk about the importance of gender equity and inclusion in higher ed. So we kind of have a lot of interesting topics. I'm sure a lot of you'll have interesting things to share as well. But without further ado, I want to introduce Mikki as a writer, diversity consultant, feminist, who is a thought leader about intersectionality, policing, gender, sexual assault, and current events. Her essays can be found in Time, New York Times, The Guardian, The Washington Post, Ebony, Essence, Salon, Boston Globe, you know, the news outlets, you name it, NBC, BBC, NPR, WBEZ. She's discussed race, feminism, education, food politics, police violence, technology, and pop culture at institutions and universities across the country. So please give Mikki a good GSU welcome.
I'm just going to preface this by saying I'm a roamer. So if you start to feel like I'm going back and forth, it's so you didn't have to watch me tap my feet in the stool. Also, these are just the height where I'll look awkward getting up and down. Don't judge me. It's fine. That bio sounds like a lot, right? That bio sounds like I have done everything and been everywhere. And I am currently in the middle of my Spanish launch. So I have a publisher in Spain. The book has been translated into a bunch of languages. And you're all looking at the end and thinking, man, something must have been really easy in there. No. Actually, from the start, I was one of those kids who failed to live up to my potential. I was a daydreamer, a doodler, a scribbler, right? There were a lot of meetings with my grandmother because I could get good grades, but paying attention in class, maybe not my strongest suit. And people sort of didn't exactly write me off, but they started to think I was kind of dingy. Yeah, she's okay, but she's scattered. Here's the thing about being a board smart kid. I once accidentally set fire to the science lab. I didn't mean to set fire to the science lab, but you're supposed to be doing a science experiment. I had to boil things in an alcohol. And of course, you were supposed to dry off the beaker, and I was that kid that didn't dry off the beaker because I forgot. Boom! Flames up the side of a wall. Charles Kosminski School on the south side of Chicago. If you're from Hyde Park, you know where it is. If you're not, we're not on the end that's pretty and shows up on stuff. We're on the other end, next to Drexel and the Ingleside. Drexside is what we called it. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble. I could have been written off for real then. Mrs. Archibald, may she rest in peace because Lord knows I gave her none, stood there and counted. You could see this woman literally counting backwards, probably from 1,000, right? We put the fire out, but the painting, the wall was new, the table was new, everything was new, and I had just set it on fire. And she had to talk to herself. And then we cleaned everything up. She talked to me about paying attention. I had to help repaint the wall because it was 1989 in Chicago Public Schools. And that was it. She sent me off to high school with the reminder that I was a smart kid, but I needed to pay attention. Okay. Went to Whitney Young. Maybe not, again, the most stellar high school career. Time to write me off again, right? No, I cut some classes. I hung out with the wrong guys, all of that. But I still finished high school at 16. Right? And everyone said, time to go to college. One more again, I said, no. First of all, because I don't know if you've ever tried to get into a college dorm at the age of 16 in Illinois, but let me tell you that the response from every college was, sure, You could theoretically attend as long as you live at home. I didn't want to live at home. That was not the point. But I had a job and I kept going. My mother and I have one of those relationships that somebody will write about someday, not positively. So we just rubbed along. I was predominantly raised by my grandmother. And my grandmother kept telling me I needed to figure something out. Okay. I'm working in a mall, Yorktown Mall in Lombard. If any of you have been out there, you know the mall. I was one of those annoying people that walks around and asks people to do a survey, right? You've seen those people. Again, dead-end job, write her off. So I joined the Army. I could tell you I joined the Army for patriotism. I joined the Army because the recruiter said I could have 4 years tuition free to college. And in my brain, that meant that fraught relationship with my mother, where she would be able to control things by paying for college, was no longer my problem. She could feel how she felt, and I could go where I went. To give you an idea of how fraught things were at the time, I didn't tell her I joined the Army till right before I left, a week and a half or so before. Yeah, it was a lot for her. I was a lot. And family members, everyone says, well, you're throwing away your talent. Okay. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do, still didn't know what I wanted to be. And everyone kept saying, if you don't go straight to college, you're never going to go to college. Joined the Army, met a guy, got married, had a baby, decided I had made a mistake with that guy. 21 is not the age to get married, right? And he kind of figured, because we'd had a baby, I was stuck. And I kind of figured he didn't understand what he had married. There is the door. Oh, you don't want to go through the door? Let me show you how you get out that door. The exit of my life is right here. You can see your kid, but this isn't working. People said, you're going to take the baby and go live with your parents. And when I tell you, the no that came out of my mouth, it came from my feet. Instead, I moved to Champaign. I became a non-traditional student, like a lot of students here at Governor State. I was 25 when I started my bachelor's degree. I had a kid. I had to figure out childcare and where we were going to live and how we were going to eat, because, of course, the guy I fired wasn't exactly paying child support. Fun fact, a withholding order does a wonderful series of things to someone eventually. Might take a while, but they do pay up. And so again, you're going to end up working a dead-end job. You're not going to make it. There's no way you can finish college with a kid. I was at Parkland College for 2 years. I transferred to the University of Illinois, finished in 18 months. Left with a bachelor's, got a job, got a series of jobs. By that point, I was writing consistently on the side, because I had always thought that I couldn't make a living as a writer, that being a writer was one of those dreams that came true for other people. But wasn't like I had to stop writing, right? I'd been doodling, writing little stories since 3rd grade. No reason to stop. I started writing articles in there. And then I had a hashtag because I got mad. I cussed somebody out. Solidarity is for white women. Trended in 7 countries, or is it 11 countries? 7 million people used it. I don't even know, right? So it was global. It was a whole thing. Articles, all of this. And people said, you just killed your career. I was a secretary. What career had I killed? I was a secretary working for the federal government with a boss whose name was Tony, and Tony was still calling Twitter Tweeter. I have a thing I still say because of him, because he never did figure out Facebook. It was that book of the face thing, right? People got mad at me and they called my boss. My boss looked at the phone and said, a tweeter. You said Twitter's, whatever, click. But again, I'd killed my career. Except I hadn't. Because when you can make people move around the world, there's nothing that can stop you. And a lot of times we feel like in our small space, in our small world, that we don't have enough power to move our own life. That other people know more than we do. That they are fully prepared and have information we don't have. I'm going to tell you a secret. I had no idea what I was doing. I kicked off that hashtag because I was mad. That was it. I wrote other hashtags because I was annoyed, angry, had something to say. Article pitches, I pitched. If I didn't get it, I didn't get it. If I did, I wrote the piece, right? My first big article for The Guardian, Matt Seaton said, well, I know you can get mad, but can you write? Now, I am a Scorpio. I am a Black girl from the South Side of Chicago.
Yes, yes.
If you ask us if we can do a thing, if you're from here, you know this. It doesn't matter if we knew how to do it 5 minutes ago. We know how to do it now. So I wrote and wrote and wrote. And people started to say you should write a book. But remember, I had killed my career in feminist writing. So I got a book offer. I got an offer. When I tell you that that money was tried in layers, it wasn't even good money from a federal government employee standpoint. I want you to think about what government employees get paid. So I said no. People thought I was a little crazy. Wasn't the first time. You may have noticed that there's a theme here where people underestimate me. I love it. I love when people think they know more than I do about where I'm going, right? Lots of folks who maybe didn't think I was the greatest were busy blocking my path to things I didn't want. I didn't tell them that, but keeps you busy. I knew what I wanted by that point. I knew if I wrote a book, I wanted to get paid for it. I knew that I didn't want it to be a thing where I wrote a book, they paid me $4, and then they put 10 cents of effort behind publicizing it. And if you've seen a hashtag called Publishing Paid Me, you know that that is a thing that can happen to young Black writers, among others. Women, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. So I sold Amazon to abolitionists and activists by accident in there. A friend asked me if I'd be interested in writing something because I always tweet about history. I said, sure. I turned in a pitch and expected to hear nothing. They loved it. Here we go. Because I don't understand parameters, guidelines, or linear time, I decided we should go from 4000 BC to the near future in 200 and so pages. Contacted Aide D'Amico and said, hey, are you down? And Aide D'Amico probably politely for about 5 seconds was like, why are you like this? Why? And then away we went, right? Meanwhile, though, I had started working on Hood Feminism. And this is a book I thought no one was going to read. I was going to write it. I was going to put it out. I was going to get someone to pay me for it. And then I was just going to let it go because I had had a lot of conversations about how much I was dividing feminism by calling out racism, about how much of a problem I was to the feminist movement. Turns out they were wrong. The book sold, did great. You can find it in Hungarian, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and Korean, right? We're maybe doing French and Dutch in there, not sure yet. It's available all over the world. And I didn't tell you all of this to be like, look at me. I tell you all of this to tell you that you don't necessarily know where you're going. You know exactly where you are, and that's about it. And sometimes you have to leap. At every point in this story, I didn't do what other people thought maybe I should do. Not going to tell you the landing was always soft. As my granny used to say, a hard head makes for a soft behind. And Lord knows, one of these things came true. But also, as my grandmother used to tell me, you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror every day. And ultimately, I can look at myself in the mirror. So what does that mean for you? If you're a non-traditional student, I can about guarantee you there is somebody in your life that doesn't understand why you're going back to school. There is someone in your life who thinks that you are wasting money, time, who thinks that you want too much, that it's too late. I didn't publish anything until my 40s, right? I started really writing, professionally writing, in my late 30s. But I didn't really get going until my 40s. These days, does it matter when I started? Right? Does it matter when I went to college? Does it matter when I got my master's? I got my master's while working at VA. We're not going to talk about how many times I sat in meetings that were 8 hours long doing homework for school. I wrote a story in one of those meetings that went on to win an award, 2015 Best American, one of the best American short sci-fi stories, right? Because I was just there. And Lord knows an 8-hour meeting has no purpose at no point. So for a lot of you, when you're at work, you're thinking, this is it. And if it's where you want to be, cool. If it's not, though, sometimes you have to take a leap. Sometimes you have to take a couple leaps. Now, what does this have to do with women's history? I'm going to tell you, even though the person who said this is otherwise deeply flawed. Well-behaved women rarely make history. And in fact, all of the women that you know, and by women, let's be real clear here. Trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary, genderqueer. If you want to argue with me about trans identity, I promise you, you don't. Try Jesus. So I say all of that to say, what people expect of you, what people expect for you is their business. What you expect for yourself is your business. And sometimes you have to mind your business and let other people worry about whatever they have going on in the back of their brains about you. A lot of you are women of color. A lot of you are in positions where somebody looks at you and they just start writing you off because of your complexion, your hair, your size, your whatever. I have the face of a damn Cupid doll. I'm about as threatening as a kitten. I know that. I am aware. I made sure that underestimating me costs. And sometimes that's all you can do is make sure that people don't see you coming. There's an old saying, some of you will know. You have to show up and show out, right? And so for a lot of women that you will be looking at this month, whether we're talking about Coretta Scott King, or Fannie Lou Hamer, or Sojourner Truth, or Harriet Tubman, or dozens of others who have made history, who have written themselves into the world. They didn't do what people expected. They weren't obedient. They weren't submissive. Some of you really know what I'm talking about there. They weren't anybody's peace. My husband is sitting here right now like, Lord knows I've not known peace since I met you. But they were who they needed to be. And when you are here, you're building. When you leave here, you're building. And what does that mean for when you go out into the world? I could have been small. I could have made myself smaller to make other people comfortable. But I wanted the world to look different. Doesn't mean I think I can change the world overnight. But there's a fight going on. There's a lot of fights going on right now, right? So some of you are watching the coverage from Ukraine and you are worried about nuclear war. Some of you are watching the footage from Texas and you were worried about your loved ones down south. It's a fight. But when we fight, we win. Now, we may not all win. We may not all get to the other side. But we can't just lay down, right? So when I'm talking about trans rights or kids on the spectrum and their rights or anything else, I'm not telling you that this is a fight you should be in alone. When I'm talking about Black girls in the Crown Act or Black girls in employment or Black girls in anything, because we're magic. And the magic is that when we fight, we win. Because nobody else is going to come to save us. Nobody else is going to fight for us the way we can fight for ourselves, right? And one of the wonderful things about the internet, and there's not much that's wonderful, I'm going to acknowledge that, is that now it's much harder to keep us quiet. It's much harder to stop us. There were a lot of people who would have told you that what I was doing was bad business, was a bad decision. Some of them are right. There are places I'll never write. I'll never write for Jezebel. Absolutely won't. They didn't want me. I didn't want them. It's fine. I'm not missing them, right? Because sometimes the things that are not for you, you just leave them over there and you go on about your business. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't care about the men in our communities, the men in our lives, but baby, as anyone that lives with me, near me, can tell you, I expect you to pull your weight, right? I have to pull mine, you have to pull yours. Together we work as a team. And that means sometimes as part of a team, you have to look at your teammate. Hey, buddy, get your weight up. Sometimes they have to look at you. Also, though, sometimes somebody got to put somebody on their back and keep going, right? And that's the thing about being from Illinois in particular. Right now, Illinois, if you look at those maps about safe places to move to for women's rights, for trans rights, for protections, blah, blah, blah. Illinois is this little green spot in that map, right? And then they're surrounding us, except for Minnesota, we are out here by ourselves. Illinois looks like this because people fought. I know it's hard to believe because we've had a dim machine for forever at this point, but also as bad as they can be, if you've met an Illinois Republican, especially the ones that like to wear Nazi outfits on TV, you know that there's been a reason to fight in this state for as long as we can remember. And that is not to say this place is perfect. I'm a Chicago girl born and raised, but I've been all up and through this state. Oh, Jesus. Southern Illinois. Parts of Northwest Illinois. Parts of Chicago. But we don't back down. That's the one excellent thing about being from here. First thing we learn how to do is swing, right? And keeping this, making this better is a fight. But looking at the rest of the country, right? Because you look at the West Coast and it's like, okay, you're okay. Parts of the East Coast, okay, you're okay. And then it's like, oh, shit. To the left of me, to the right of me. You got to remember, though, that the rights people enjoy here, they're because we make our politicians go to jail. The best thing we've ever given governors in Illinois is handcuffs. We could give some mayors some handcuffs as a gift. I think it would help. It would clarify some things for them. But when we're talking about politics, when we're talking about the world as we see it and the world as we want to see it, we're talking about public service. All of you are going to leave this place at one point or another, right? Whether it's to retire or because of how you have graduated or whatever. I want you to go into your new places and think about how you vote, about how you move, how you donate. Who are you showing up for? Because I'm going to tell you, it's important to show up for yourself. Show up for yourself every day. But if you have enough, you have to show up for other people too. Because a lot of times what you will find happening around you is that you think you don't have any power and you don't have any privilege, right? I'm going to break it down. You're an American, you have privilege. You're a Black American, you have less privilege. You're a woman, you have some privilege, especially if you're a cis woman. Not as much as a white man in America, don't get me wrong. But when it comes time to do things like run for office, vote, make decisions in the workplace, your voice matters. Yesterday, I did an event in Texas. Some of you may know this, and if you don't, I'll tell you. My book is currently banned in Texas. The event was originally supposed to be different. And they never said safety reasons, but we transitioned to virtual. They never said safety reasons, but we transitioned from a convivial fireside chat to a restricted, filtered one, because there were things that they didn't want me to have to deal with, I guess. I couldn't see the people I was speaking to, which is very unusual for these events, right? And I thought, this is bizarre. This is odd. And I was talking to a friend who's still in Texas, and she said, oh, Mikki. And I said, what? And she says, I know you know better. And I have if these hoes want a problem, they can come find me. Attitude, right? I'm a Second Amendment Black American. Right? That's my thing. One of those things I I don't believe in unsecured or carrying it around every which way you go. But my granddaddy had guns and I grew up with guns, and that's just where we are. So I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof attitude, right? And she's counting, because people do that in my life. People in my life sometimes have to pause and be like, oh, she is okay. And then she said, it's risky right now for you. And I said, these people took a risk. They should have just told me. I'm willing to take a risk. Because in my brain, if it's risky for me to be there, you're risking your job to bring me there. Right? And I said something, and one of the people said, because she was the director, she was already leaving. She was already moving. She said, my name is on every single email. I'm the one that did the approving. I'm the one that signed off on it. So, even though she definitely wasn't the one that did all the work, even though I could tell she had a team, if somebody had a problem, it was going to be with her. She had volunteered herself for the target. And they had done their best to make sure I never had to notice. I noticed because this is what I do, but they didn't want me to be uncomfortable, right? But I think a lot since this process about the risks that we are willing to take for other people, the risks we are willing to take to bring in information into a place that is hostile to it. Because I got up there on camera and I talked about all manner of stuff, right? Because again, if you knock on my door, good luck. Good luck. And that's what they wanted. They wanted the challenge. They wanted the risk to be direct and in the face of the students and the staff. Because they know, as we saw today, a judge moved in Texas to be like, no, you can't take these people's kids. We saw that Texas is suing itself at this point. And you have to pause and you have to think about the people who can't leave or who don't want to leave, who will not leave. They will stand and fight. And I don't know what's going to happen in Texas. I have a lot of faith in a certain part of Texas. I do. But I think a lot about what it takes to be someplace where you have to worry about the things they have to worry about and decide anyway, I'm going to put my name on this. I'm going to take this risk because I want these kids to hear what you have to say. And we talked about food insecurity and police brutality. And then we talked about trans rights and we talked about women's rights. And I made a point of saying that whatever rights you think you have that can never be taken from you, they can always be taken. So you always have to be ready to fight for your rights. And it's not just voting, although I'm a big fan of voting. Because if voting didn't matter, the Republicans wouldn't try so hard to stop it. So putting your foot on a politician's neck, though. Now I'm going to tell you, full disclosure, I lived under Mayor Daley, right? The last politician I liked was Harold Washington. I was 8, okay? I will not ever tell you that the politicians are the good guys, they're on your side. The only thing you can buy easier than a gun in America is a politician. If you got enough money, you can own 5. So you have to make it cost to try to undermine your community. You have to make it cost for them to not do what they're supposed to do. And that doesn't just mean in the voting booth. It means challenging everything, right? You got to file a lawsuit, you file a lawsuit. I was telling a story while we were sitting here. Our youngest is on the spectrum. And we were in Chicago Public Schools. We've now moved because I couldn't do this and deal with Chicago Public Schools. And it wasn't that I didn't care about Chicago Public Schools. It was that the first day of 8th grade, we had already reached my lawyer about them adhering to his IEP, right? But we had fought for 8 years. I got no problem giving somebody else who still wants to fight with the money to help fight, because ultimately, legally, his right to be educated should be protected. right? We had options. And to be honest, I had reached a point where I felt like I am making you fodder in my fight, and I need to take this kid out of this situation. It wasn't fair to my kid. But that's a fight that's happening every day all around the country, not just for IEPs to be enforced. The books they want to pull out of schools. My book is on the list. 800 and some odd other books are currently on some of these lists. I think it's 850 total. Might be 1,000 by now. They keep finding new things to add. They don't want these kids to know things. They don't want them to know that other people are human. They don't want them to hear perspectives that are not their parents. Except it's not actually their parents so much as it is this group of people who doesn't want parents to be able to make decisions, who doesn't want school boards to be able to make decisions, right? And you might think, okay, I don't have any kids. This is not my problem right now. It will be. It'll be your problem because now I'm going to tell you a thing. A lot of the books that they are trying to yank, they're available in other countries. If nothing else than pure self-interest for yourself, your children, your neighbors, kids, nieces, nephews, you choose. You should want them to be informed so they can be competitive. Because magically, and this is a proof that these people don't read books, some of the same districts that don't want hood feminism in their schools, they've been buying Amazon's Abolitionist and Activist because she's wearing what they think of as a Rosie the Riveter look on the cover. They didn't open the book. All of the information they're trying to keep out from other people's books is accessible in there. Links, references. I love telling kids stuff with pretty pictures. But they did all of that because really, it's easier to lead an ignorant population. It is almost impossible to lead an informed, well-educated population towards a bad idea. Right? So when we're talking about fighting, when we're talking about showing up, you got to show up for schools. You got to show up to keep police from having more money than housing, right? And I'm not even going to debate the defund police. I'm going to tell you they have enough money. Don't give them any more. Personally, I'd like to give them less, but we can have that negotiation at any point. But ask yourself why it's more important to give cops money than to make sure kids have books to read. Why is it more important to curtail the rights of women, of trans people to be employed, of all of these things, than it is to make sure that the power grid works in Texas, than it is to address the pandemic, than it is to do literally anything? The answer isn't because we're going to save ourselves by being a Christian nation. That's what they say. They love that sentence. I don't know what Bible they read. I would love to know, right? I'm a former church kid. I had to read all the Bibles. But Jesus was turning over tables. He wasn't taking books from babies, right? So if you're going with the Christian thing, you should read the book that you're pulling from. They don't open books. I'm just going to say that. And you know, as you are, some of you will work here as you are shaping this place, this brand new institution. I know it's not brand new, but me and this institution are almost the same age, so brand new by my standards. I want you to think about what you're bringing in here. Not just bringing in people like me in our books, but the students you're bringing in. Because those students will change the world. When I first started at Parkland, I was a mess. Now when I go back, I'm the celebrity alum, right? But Parkland worked for me because Parkland had daycare. Parkland worked for me because the bus stop was right there. Everything was in a building I could get back and forth to. All I had to do to take my child to school was get off the bus in front of my school, walk half a block to drop kid off, turn around, go to class. And it was open all day, right? I was living in public housing. I was one of those people on food stamps, right? That you see in the line in the grocery store. And again, right or wrong. That social safety net is why we're here. It's why I'm able to do what I'm able to do. Haven't needed it for years. Have definitely paid more in taxes than I ever got. Whew. And I'm okay with that, honestly, because I want girls like me, people like me, who took a bump or 2 or 3 or didn't know what they were doing, to have time and space to figure out what they're doing, to be able to get up to fight. Because this is the thing. Fighting takes time. Fighting takes energy. If you're worried about your housing, if you're worried about food, if you're worried about healthcare, you don't have time to fight. And you might be thinking, that's interesting. Why are those things always under attack? Can you guess how different the world might look? How different the country might look if we didn't have news stories about all of those red states that keep talking about my tax dollars, hoarding the tax dollars that are supposed to go to their people. Because poor people vote differently than rich people. Poor people have different priorities than wealthy people. Now, that's one of the criticisms I levy in the book, right? Mainstream middle-class feminism isn't getting it done for anybody else because they have everything. But it's not just feminism, right? When we're looking at politicians who are career politicians, right? Mike Madigan just got the gift of handcuffs from the feds. Madigan has been, I don't even know what to call what Madigan's been doing, right? The demon in the corner all my life. And you have to look, though, at the decisions that were made along the way, at the decisions that governors, some of whom still deserve handcuffs, made along the way that didn't seem to make any sense for the population. Yes, greed, absolutely greed. But also, it's much easier to control people who are hungry. It's much easier to control people, and I'm going to use this as an example. Every time we look at New York, we hear about how bad their mayor and their governor are, and we honestly sometimes kind of go, why are you voting for these people? I've definitely done it. And then I remember that part of me having the time in Chicago to look at which judges should be voted for, to look at who's running for mayor, my rent isn't $4,000 for a 2-bedroom, right? Actually, I've never paid $4,000 a month in rent, and I never will if I can help it. But when you have to pay that kind of money, you have to work 2 jobs, right? Or a job and a side job, whatever, a hustle. How much time do you have? How much energy do you have? Where are you able to do? And for the people who do have the energy and the time, how are they voting? What are their priorities? It's probably not feeding poor people. It's probably not getting rid of homelessness. It's probably not things at the bottom, unless they've been there, right? But we're lightning strikes, right? I am lightning struck over and over in the same spot. I know that. My vote is good. My vote is not enough. My letters, my voice, all of these things. This is a team sport. This teams are all going to have to fight. And you're going to be thinking, okay, but you've been talking about fighting a long time. Why are you talking about fighting so much? Because you're going to feel it. You're going to get tired. You're going to want to lay down and not fight anymore, right? There are going to be days where you get up and you look like a little kid. You just pull up a chair and all you do is sit there and stare at your walls because you were so tired. Because that's life. You should be able to do that. You should be able to stop fighting. You should be able to lay down and rest. But that requires the rest of the team to exist. That requires you to be able to work with other people who can pick up the slack. None of us should ever feel like we're so integral to anything that that work can't continue without us. If you feel like that, you need a better approach. Because not only does that waylay burnout, that waylays never winning the fight, right? One of the reasons I have the attitude that I have, go to Texas, go here, go there, if something happens to me, my kids are fine. They will be great. I'm not worried about it. He doesn't love this answer, just so you know. He's giving me a look right now. I don't even need to see it. Yeah, that look is there. But the message would continue, right? I'm going to use an old Firefly reference for those of you that are sci-fi kids. You can't stop the signal, right? And part of that is that you have to be so loud that other people are speaking up too. You have to be willing at work, at school, wherever you are, to open your mouth. Now, some of you are going to be hiring. Some of you are going to be interviewing. You're going to get advice about how to wear your hair, how to dress, how to. I'm going to tell you, see all of this? Yeah. I'm going to tell you that I got many a look. But now here's a fun fact. If you work for the federal government, your hairstylists are protected. They literally can't say anything to you about your hair if you are wearing natural hair, right? That changes who works for the federal government. That changes the makeup of the staff that makes decisions and has a vote and a voice in the meetings. And I know that we have a lot to say about Congress critters, and we should, but now I'm going to tell you, as we discovered when Ronner, I'm going to use that man's name and not what I usually call him. See how polite I am sometimes? When he was in office and it felt like nothing was moving because people just dug their heels in, right? When the Department of Ed they were trying to gut it and those staffers just didn't do what she said. Sometimes being there long enough to just say no is enough. I'm not going to implement this. I'm not going to go along with this. You're going to have to boost me out of here before you can do that, right? And so as you're building this place, as you're building other places, I want you to think not just about how you want people to look based off what white supremacy tells you, but about who you want those people to be and how you want them to move and how you want that team to function. Because the more diverse the faces in a room, the better the decisions. Functionally, side note, if you're going into business, the more diverse the team in a business, the better the products are, right? Purely selfishly, you'll make more money if you have a range. You'll do more work if you have a range. And I think you just need to understand the reason I'm saying these things to you is because I don't know where you're going or what you're going to do. I don't know you individually. But I know that there is power in individual people. We are in a society that absolutely tells us society decides. People decide, right? What people? Who gets to make decisions? Who gets to make choices? Who gets to propose things? I didn't come through any of the doors I was supposed to come through. I'm not even going to give you some heroic story of cutting out my own path, right? I walked a path that was there that people just weren't paying attention to, right? Kicked down some doors, maybe. The Kool-Aid man had the right idea. There's a wall. No, there's not. And you may be thinking, okay, but that's you. I can't do that. You can't? Why? What's at stake? Are you going to tell me that people won't like it because I'm not nice? Baby, I am a certified asshole. Dyed in the wool, 100%. From birth, right? My granny would have told you I was born with a caul over my face. And that was not as she thought at first because I had the sight. It was to protect the rest of the world, right? Didn't last. And the reality was that sometimes the people that don't like you or that don't like how you're doing, whatever you're doing, that don't like the way you work, they don't deserve your respect. They don't deserve you thinking about them, right? And really, it's a fight. You want to survive, you want to thrive, you want to, maybe y'all will be friends afterwards. Some folks, though, you have to leave them behind over there. I mean, there's a shirt that says with Harriet, not to argue with people, that Harriet with a what? Right. And on top of that, genuinely, honestly, someone who wants to stop you from having enough to eat, from having a safe place to live, for being safe from brutality. Do you want them in your world? Do you care how they feel or how they think of you? And I know people are going to say, well, I didn't say that. I just think that there are better ways. Okay, well, what are you doing, right? Your director of social justice is going to take people to show them better ways, calmer, beloved ways. That is great. Absolutely great. Right? But also, those fights, the civil rights movement, there's a reason there was more than one hand. Right? You could go the nice route. You could understand, or you could go the other way. Up to you. Right? It could be deacons in defense, or I have a dream. You pick. Right? And I know that now, Martin Luther King, for a lot of people, is a model. I'm a historian by training. I've read the letters. I've seen the things that they said about him when he was marching. Seen the things that they said about Fannie Lou Hamer, right? She very famously explained that if somebody threw dynamite on her porch, he wasn't going to live to write his mama again because she kept something in the corner of every room, right? People don't talk about that the same way they used to. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't throw dynamite on her porch. Because now we get to the meat of it. Your opposition is a coward. They don't want change. They don't want you to be equal or safe, not because they are necessarily even evil. That is a debate. They're afraid. They think that they will be done the way that others have done you in your community, have done other marginalized communities. That's the big fear. If you ever go to their message boards, there's a lot of these message boards, right? And you really pay attention, we're the scary stories in the dark, right? It's the boogeyman. And I see their videos on TikTok and elsewhere because it's my job to look at this stuff. It's hard to take it seriously. I'm gonna be honest. Like 95% of these people are really just scared of change. They have embraced bigotry because it gives them an identity. Now, some of them are truly awful people, and we should be concerned. But many of their supporters, they don't know anything because they came from places where their rights to education weren't protected, where they weren't given the information in any meaningful way. And they've made decisions based off of whatever they were told, right? And we've talked about a lot of things today, I know, but I know that QAnon and other things have turned up a lot. I'm sorry for what this does to your comments. I'm sorry in advance for your YouTube comments. But watch those videos sometimes and watch them con themselves into believing in any number of things. Ivermectin is big, but so is their belief in a secret plot by various groups of people to kill white people. That is an old myth. It used to be used to justify lynchings. It's an old fear pandered to by racists for a long time. And you have to ask yourself, what are you so afraid of? Because if the violence was coming, baby, we've had 400 years. We've had a long time. So when you are in that room with the person who says the thing, and you know that they're scared of you, you might as well use the fear. They're more concerned about you than you are about them liking you. You can say to someone who thinks, well, I don't think trans kids should exist. I don't think Black I'm sorry, they're not calling it Black history. They're calling it critical race theory, but it's really history that they're objecting to. I don't think critical race theory should be taught in schools. Why? Make it uncomfortable to be a bigot. Make it uncomfortable to vote these ways, to say these things, right? Make it cost for them to be so wrong. It doesn't mean you don't vote. It doesn't mean you don't do petitions or marches or anything else. But I'm seeing a lot of people trying to polite their way through a fight. And maybe that is possible. I do not have that skill. I am built for something different, okay? And it's funny, when you start to ask, when you make people think, they change their minds. They make different decisions. I want us to bring shame back, right? Not personal shame, but I want people to feel ashamed of being loud and wrong and racist and bigoted and anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ rights and anti-disability rights and all of these things. Because right now, they are saying to themselves, well, no one's telling me I'm wrong. No one's saying that this is an error, or if they are, I don't respect them. But they're sitting in rooms with coworkers. They're sitting in rooms with family members. They're sitting in rooms with classmates. And sometimes we want to be polite. We want to be nice. We want things to be calm. Confrontation doesn't have to be violent. Confrontation can just be you saying, why do you feel that way? Bring facts, but also make them explain it to you. Because if you're going to be in a fight with someone, you might as well know why. And if they can't explain it to you, you know already that they don't know what they're talking about. So now you bring facts. Will it always work? No. Some people you really gonna have to just, 2 pieces and a biscuit, I think is what we're saying right now. But for some people, a mirror is enough. Thank you all for coming and listening to me for an hour. I hope that worked for you, including the fact that I, as you can see, am not great at sitting still. I appreciate so much having such an attentive audience. I hope you carry this into the world. Fight, not just for yourself, but for your community, for the future, because you owe yourself that much and you owe your team that much. Thank you.
Tremendous. Well, very profound,
Marching orders.
just wonderful. As far as Mikki's, Miss Kendall's analysis of feminism and just really world events. So now we envision we want to talk to each other now. And so I don't know if Mikki says we have these chairs.
Yeah, I'll come on up.
And definitely want to start Q&A and have a dialogue with each other about what Mikki just talked about. And it's the main thing is that what I envision this event is us talking to each other and really lifting up some of the points that Mikki brought, particularly about hood feminism. We can start with that as far as any questions about hood feminism or just thoughts, and let's have a dialogue with each other in this space. So,
right here, there's no numbers on the tables. There's a microphone though, right there.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. All right, oh wow. Your story is my story. I'm a little bit older than you, but I'm from the Lower East Side of Detroit. In the notion and the concept and the clothes that I wear, not the physical clothes, but my persona has been the fight, and I applaud you, and I thank you for coming today. Right on.
Thank you. And y'all don't be shy.
Hi, Mickey. Thank you so much. What's interesting is that I do understand your journey. My name is Karen, but I find myself, there's Karen, then there's Karen 2.0. And you have to ride that line. And sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's a blade. And when you're trying to define your own hood feminism and trying to stay true to it, sometimes it feels like your own betrayal is yourself.
I think sometimes we have to give ourselves some grace, right? There are some situations where it is just abjectly unsafe for you to speak up in the moment, and you have to make the choices in the moment. It doesn't mean you can't make a different choice, because there's always recourse. There's always another way, right? I try, in general, to be somewhat strategic. I know that I am currently existing in a very privileged position. My boss is me. If you call me to complain about me, well, right? If you call anybody to complain about me, I don't know if folks realize this, but the people in my life who are really in my life will be like, and? But I know that that's privilege. I know that we can't always afford to leave a job, that we can't always afford to get into a conflict in a workspace or whatever. But we can usually afford to submit an anonymous report or to encourage somebody else to submit a report. We can say, you know, I'd really like us to interview insert name of person here so that we're not in this solo, right? We can make a lot of decisions. And it's not a betrayal of yourself to have a strategy, to have to be strategic. I think once you have made the decision that you're going to fight, sometimes you have to figure out the best way to go about the fight. But it's a series of battles. It is not just one and done. So you didn't win this day. You got to go step back, think about it, figure out how to come back, and then you win the next day.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Please, anyone else?
In honor of Women's History Month, I think there's this notion of looking at women having to get comfortable with being unpopular, with not being liked, right? Because we have been raised to be liked. And it's hard to take leaps and to do what I heard is intuitively your spirit knew what you had to do, even if it wasn't popular. And you took the leap to honor you. And I would you please speak about the importance of honoring who we are as women.
So I'm going to say this. I am my family's black sheep, right? I grew up in one of those families with a mix of usher board and policy. If you know, you know, right? I was raised predominantly by my grandmother, also a family black sheep. And so I've long believed that in many ways, respectability is a trap, right? It is a cage that never, ever gets comfortable. It just gets smaller and smaller. And so I wish I could tell you that it was bravery, but honestly, I was like a frog that was introduced to boiling water, right? And my grandmother spent some years trying to make sure I sat right. And I think I'm supposed to like lean my legs a certain way and whatever. I was a girl that straddled chairs. She was going through it. But also, and it's a complicated thing, my grandmother had tried to fit in the box and it was never comfortable. My aunt had tried to fit in the box. It was never comfortable. And in many ways, it was miserable. And on my stepdad's side of the family, they're very Catholic, right? I have cousins who have done the mission trip thing. So I am the outlier. And I used to think, I wish I could be that way. I wish I could fit, right? And then I started to look at whether or not they were happy. Because sometimes the most selfish thing in the world that you can do is also the best thing you can do, right? We're often told not to be selfish, to share, be nice. But But I noticed that people who said no to all of that often had really good lives. So I have an aunt who declined to get married. She had male friends, but she had decided a very long time ago that she would be in control of her life. And, you know, she's a boomer, so you can just imagine the responses to this. She travels. She has a wonderful set of friends. She has a friend, right? His nickname is Jersey, because that's, if you know how they move. And I can call her and be like, what is that noise? And I kid you not, one day she said, I'm at the Lady Gaga concert. Ma'am, why? I was curious. Okay. And you just kind of have to, right? She'll call you. I'm in Hilton Head. She called us one day. My husband remembers this conversation. She was like, I'm going to Barcelona. Why are you going to Barcelona? Because I want to. You do that? You don't have to have a business, a thing. I want to. So she put her money aside. She planned her trip. Off she goes. And she was supposed to be the mean one. The one who was going to be old and miserable and alone. She got older. If that's what miserable looks like, please give me some of it. And I'll be honest, she is never alone, right? Because there's a friend. And I mean, sometimes it's a friend. Sometimes she's with a group of other women who made similar decisions. Some have gotten married, some have not. And they go to plays. They take trips. They sit up and she's getting some kind of endorsement on her master's as teaching license. She's supposed to be retired. I can't explain any of what's happening, but she's taken 2 college classes a semester. And she doesn't like them being online, so I have to hear about that, but she's still doing this homework. And periodically I want to ask her, how did you decide that you were just going to do what you wanted to do? But she's already given me the answer. I know the answer she'll give me. I looked at what the rest of them were doing and they were miserable, and I didn't want to be miserable. And sometimes being true to yourself is what other people are going to call selfish. It's saying no to things you don't want to do. Saying yes to the things you want to do, even if other people think it's a bad idea. It's making a decision that is best for you, your family, your community, whatever your framework is, even if other people don't like it. I know for a fact there are members of our family who have been riding the she will end up old and miserable and alone train for decades. I've heard the speech. Y'all, I started hearing that speech when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I'm in my mid-40s, 45 to be exact. She is not miserable. She is not alone. She is rocking it out. And she's an award-winning principal. She's changed the lives of so many kids. There are people who, when I say her name, they will say, I was at her school. Oh, how is she doing? I love her. They come by, they visit her, they send her things, they bring her flowers. She's touched the world. If that is what going your own direction means, maybe that is the North Star I will follow. So sometimes being true to yourself is looking at whether or not the life other people want for you is the life you want for yourself. Is that life comfortable? Is it happy? Does it serve you? Or does it serve them? Right? We have all known someone who was nice. So nice, people walked all over them.
Absolutely.
Right? Some of us are the mean friend of that overly nice person. Some of us are the person who ends up saying to people, no, not with my friend. No, you won't. And there are times where you have to catch yourself because you haven't even let them speak up because you see what's coming, right? But the reason you feel like that is because you've watched people prepare to walk over their face to get comfortable, to get what they wanted, what they needed, whatever. We all have one. And then as you stand there between them and the problem, and other people say, you're being so mean, you're controlling, whatever. You're like, no, she can do whatever she wants. You can't do whatever you want to her, right? Because you're not really being mean. You're just actually being a friend. Be your own friend. Be the meanest friend you ever had. Speak up for yourself. Do what you want to do. That doesn't mean run out and, I don't know, set fire to 37 buildings, whatever. That means, though, make the career decisions, the life decisions. Because I promise you, in 40 years, when the end comes, 50 years, 60 years, 80 years for some of you got some real young faces. You're just so cute. You are not going to remember the people who used you to make themselves feel better. You're going to remember the decisions you made for yourself. And you might as well live with those decisions as being good things for you. Okay, next question. Come on, don't be shy.
First of all, thank you again for coming. I've been so inspired and challenged. I don't even know which question to ask, but since this is an audience of higher education, I'm wondering what you think we should be doing that we're not doing or could be doing to further the cause. I really was inspired by the line, "When we fight, we win." And for me, I've been teaching 14 years at this school, and well, the only school I've taught. But I constantly am kind of reinventing myself in the classroom in terms of the way I push students to challenge problematic texts. I think people will say my texts are problematic. I don't believe that because I wouldn't choose them. But I'm loving this idea of how do I even take that a step further beyond just reading and dialoguing about these ideas that cause discomfort amongst other folks that our students are, interacting with. So I'm just wondering if you have some thoughts on that.
So one of my thoughts is that this is hearkening back to my days in undergrad. When I first started at Parkland, there was a sociology teacher who everybody said was mean, right? I didn't take her class, my husband did. And she was definitely a pistol, we'll put it that way. I took another class just because of schedule. And my other class just wasn't as good as his class was, right? Because they argued, they challenged, they debated. I transferred to U of I take a race, ethnicity, and class, sociology class. And we argued in that class. But one of the challenges was whatever it is you think the world shouldn't have, shouldn't be doing, shouldn't whatever, go meet those people. Interact with those people. That doesn't mean you have to, attend a Klan rally, but get online, read a book, whatever, great, but also talk to people. And what was fascinating for me was learning in that class how much of what I say to you about fear, I'm not trying to give bigots a pass, but talking to some of the people on that campus, because U of I is in Central Illinois, and there were groups on the quad, if you know, you know. How much of it was fear? How much of it was ignorance, right? Some people weren't interested in learning, some of them were though. And as you start to have those interactions and those dialogues in a safer space, which is a college generally, you start to realize how different an education pre-college can be, right? I grew up in Hyde Park, mixed race, mixed income. Even though my school was predominantly segregated, we had one white kid. His mother taught there. You get where I'm going. We literally lived in a neighborhood with a major internationally known university. So we had Asian neighbors, we had Latino neighbors, and we had all of these things. I, for years, didn't realize you weren't supposed to have pierogies and elotes and barbecue chicken together, because that's how I grew up, right? Listen, it's delicious. I'm just saying, right? But when you're doing that kind of interaction, and then you go into a world where there are people you will encounter who have never had those kinds of interactions, you are having two very different conversations about two very different experiences, right? And sometimes bridging that gap in college is the best place to do it because there's been no chance before, right? I don't know the complete breakdown of your student body, but I've noticed that you are both very Black and your Latinx population is growing. There are conflicts even within those communities and town halls and conversations that could be happening on campus that would have people carry those things off campus back into their day-to-day life. And I think sometimes colleges miss that opportunity because they want things to be nice. They don't want there to be a conflict of saying, let us have a controlled conflict. I'm not saying debate anyone's humanity, but have conversations about why you think the way you do. Because so much of what people think about Black Americans is from exported television, for instance, right? So much of what we think, though, about other cultures is from imported television. We don't really know each other. We just feel like we do because we see each other on our screens. Okay, y'all, you know, I will come down there.
Are there any, Shannon, are there any, okay, question, okay. So, yeah, please, again, we've talked about a lot of very serious topics here. About trans rights, I mean, especially any discussion about that. One thing that really reached out to me as your diversity officer is Mikki talking about the need to have diversity and how it leads to inclusive excellence. It leads to, again, better productivity in the boardroom and corporate room. So please, again, we have her here before we break bread again. So
Yeah, there's somebody in the back right there. Yeah.
Do it. Hello? Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Candace. I'm the residence hall director on campus. And I just want to say, like, one, thank you for coming out. Two, I also have a shared experience of living in Southern Illinois and the racism and all the things. And you said about talking to people and like getting to know them. I went to SIUC in Carbondale, which is super unique, specifically for Black history, but also just like the historical context of being so close to Anna, Illinois, which is a sundown town. I do agree that talking to people, having those conversations and learning about why they think the way they think is super important, not just for intellectual purposes, but surviving and also thriving and also learning how to navigate different spaces, because you have folks who come from towns where their grandfather, grandmother were in political positions, and they get to a school where it's super diverse and they share like, this is my first time ever interacting with someone Black this close that isn't in a service position, or this is my first time having a Latina roommate because the only Latinas I know work at a restaurant or do some type of service work. But I do have a question. How do you think Black women in higher ed can build intergenerationally across like spectrums of all things? Because GSU is like also a very unique place in regards to the diversity of age, not only in our students, but also our faculty and our staff.
So I'm going to challenge the Black admins here to mentor young Black students. I'm not even saying to be a full-time mentor. I'm saying be available to answer the questions, to do that little bit of nudging that sometimes come in. And that isn't just for professors or whatever. One of the best mentors I ever had originally was a secretary. She was one of the people who said to me when I was trying to find a job, because I had a bachelor's degree in history, and if you know, you know. She said, places are always hiring for my job. The government is always hiring for secretaries. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking like, nobody hires secretaries. Like, you don't really, you see receptionist positions you don't see. And she says, look for operations assistant. She gave me this list of things that were synonyms essentially for admin work. So I did that. And I went from making not enough money, right? I've had one of those jobs where you were making money, but it wasn't enough, to a full-time job with benefits. And yeah, didn't have the most glamorous title, but it turns out admins get paid well. And she could have not told me, right? We just chatted casually. I'd been a student employee, all of that. But I'd been to the Career Center, I'd done all of that, but I was a working mom. I needed hours that were normal, right? That would make my life easier with the kid in school. And a lot of first-time jobs, they're expecting you to have no children, no responsibilities, be available for anything. Sometimes you have to turn around to the people who are younger than you and help them. Give them advice. And I don't mean tell them you should do. When they ask you a question, you answer. But vice versa. Even to this day, when my son we were having the most problems with the IEP process, I called my aunt because she'd been a principal and she would know something. And then I had to listen. And sometimes active listening intergenerationally is hard. We tend to knee-jerk, right? And I know that there's going to be some range of, you girls shouldn't dress this way, you kids shouldn't act this way, shouldn't talk this way, you adults don't understand. But there's knowledge at both ends of this spectrum. There's knowledge at every point, in every step. Is it always going to be applicable? No. Sometimes you have to step back and ask, is this person trying to hurt me or are they trying to help? Do I need to get upset that they don't understand, or do I need to explain so they understand what I'm asking, right? Some of you are going to get the age-old, get out there and hit the pavement with your resume advice. It's terrible advice, don't do it. Terrible advice, don't do it. But you're also probably going to get, my friend is hiring. My so-and-so is hiring, right? I have a cousin, much younger, who's looking for work. We invest because we're old, and that's what old people do. We invest our money. Well, I just got an email from the place that we invest through that their admin is retiring. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell my cousin, hey, here's a place you can apply. I know the boss, right? It may not be her dream job. She may not stay there forever. Right now, she's working for Instacart. Mm-hmm. Full-time job with benefits is going to be better than that while she figures out what she wants to do, while she goes to grad school, while she does these things. Sometimes you have to leverage your connections. Sometimes you have to be willing to make connections. And I think, especially in academia encourages people to compete in ways that are bizarre and unhealthy, right? Granted, my experience is largely with Big Ten and a private Jesuit school, among others, but you can choose not to make it a competition. You can choose to build it into collaboration. It's amazing what happens when you collaborate, especially with your students. I'm looking at all of you. Every one of you. And this goes for the men too. Okay, y'all. Come on, don't be shy. I'm gonna start walking up to your tables. And I'm as delicate as a Mack truck.
Hello.
Yes.
How are you? I'm a student, a grad student here, working on my dissertation. So I bought your book, and then I saw my email. I was like, oh, she's gonna be here. I have to be here because my work is centered around Black feminist thought and the intersectionality of African American women, and your book kind of being rooted in the intersectionality of African American women and society's tendency to kind of ignore that in many ways, in many spaces. And so you said that people will literally walk on your face when it benefits them, if it makes them more comfortable. And within organizational spaces, I think, that's for organizations that are rooted in white male dominant ideology, patriarchy, it benefits them in many ways to continue to create policies and practices that are rooted in those things, because the people at the top are, they still benefit. And I have so many questions, but how do we, first, as African American women, acknowledge that we do have a distinct set of knowledge and experiences that we bring to these spaces and these organizations? And then how do we get those spaces to acknowledge that, allowing us to be authentically ourselves, to lead in ways that are authentic, when it could be harmful and it could be detrimental economically, socially, but it's absolutely necessary, in my opinion, for us to be able to widen the definition of what we consider effective leadership in these spaces. If we continue to say that it's, it's this way, and we're not acknowledging the distinct skill sets that African American women bring, then are we being as effective as we could as these public institutions or democratic, agencies that are supposed to represent the people?
So one of the things I started asking, backstory, I used to work for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau back when they were first being built. And I was in this meeting, and we were talking about things with a guy who's a noted economist. He's flying in from Toronto. He teaches the whole 9 yards. And we're talking about the protections we're going to build in for consumers. And we kept talking about the middle class. This was the harp. Middle class, middle class, middle class. Most Americans aren't middle class. So I said something about it. And yeah, this is partially risky. Full disclosure, I am a person who feels like I can always find another job. I don't have to be miserable anywhere. But that is because I've had jobs that were miserable, and they just stayed miserable, so you might as well leave, right? So I asked him, who are we supposed to be serving? And he says, well, the public. I said, but you keep talking about the middle class. And he looked at me, right? A couple people at the table are kind of looking at me because he's a big deal. I won't say what I thought. And he says, well, I just meant as a particular focus, the people who are going to have money to lose. And I said, poor people have money to lose. And he kind of does this little weird chuckle sound. Just, whoo. And he says, well, there's no, poor people aren't here. And I said, what do you mean poor people aren't here? I mean, in these rooms making these decisions, people who have lived, and he says, people who have lived in stuff like public housing, who have done, he's got a list, right? But I pinged onto the public housing, right? Been on food stamps was the second thing. And these are the two places where I was like, me and this job are about to break up. Okay. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, well, those people need like a check and a hug. But these policies. So by this point, another woman at the table who was very senior, and I mean very, very testifying in front of Congress, senior, who was talking to someone else at first, her head has begun to turn. Have you ever seen that Stewie Griffin thing? Yeah. Her head kind of. And I am meanwhile about to imitate Linda Blair. And so I said, I lived in public housing for several years in college. I was on food stamps. What are you talking about? Well, I didn't mean like you. She says, then did you mean like me? And when I tell you, you could hear the slam, right? You could hear the clench. And he says, no. I was just, and we did that thing Black girls sometimes do when we have agreed without knowing each other prior that this man's life, it's not, we can't let this go. So we sat there, and this meeting took a turn for a few minutes, and some policy changes came out of that. But we sat there and challenged him on why he would think that people who need payday loans, who need to do short-term title loans, et cetera, didn't deserve better protections. And the answer fundamentally was that he hadn't thought about it. Now, remember I said he's a noted economist, teaches, so forth, so on. But it wasn't just the subprime mortgage market, right? That he was already writing those people off. He was writing off everyone below a certain line. And it was risky. My job was on the line, hers really wasn't, but I really appreciated her showing up in the moment, and she has continued to show up. But I was going to ride that horse regardless, because one of the things that bothered me in the conversation at the time, all the focuses were on credit card protections. And if you've ever been really broke, you know that having a credit card is the least of how far downhill things could go. So it changed how they approached payday lenders. A lot of payday lenders incorporate in the Bahamas and other places, but operate in the US. And CFPB made a lot of them decide to roll up shop because we weren't a good place to be anymore, because they couldn't prey on people. And we had found documents, including their own internal documents, that made it clear that their target consumer wasn't a middle-class person. Mm-hmm. It was a low-income person, a check-dependent person with a guaranteed income. Their specific biggest target was veterans and military members, because those checks were guaranteed to come every month. You serve Uncle Sam deducts it and pays them. You've got no real way out of it. He was going to write them off because in his head, poor people weren't any people that mattered. When we got into the meat of it about what military members make, what do you mean? Yeah, this is what they make. This is what veterans make. This is what college students make. These are the people you are writing off. This is what someone who works at McDonald's or whatever, this is the range. Oh, he had come from Canada and he didn't really understand America. Right? He taught classes here. He didn't really understand it. And sometimes showing up, the reason I advise people to ask is because people will tell you so much about themselves when they're answering your questions, right? They will tell you their prejudices. They will tell you the gaps in their knowledge. They will tell you the lies they have been told. Give them enough rope. And then you can formulate your response to undermine their argument. You gotta listen to know what you're gonna respond to, don't get me wrong. But that active listening, they're not actively listening to you at first, and then when you start chopping their argument to bits, they are now, right? This is also, though, why I tell you, and I mean this, being nice is overrated, right? Being liked, all of that, it's overrated. That man probably hates my guts to this day. It doesn't matter. He has to see my book on shelves anyway.
Mikki, you've spoken a lot about, my name is Cynthia Hudson. You spoke a lot about fear, and I'm curious, can you speak about perhaps your own? Like, what is next for Mikki, or what is it that you may have some apprehension about that you have not navigated yet?
So my next book is a complete departure. It is history, really. It is me tying the myth of the American dream to my own family's history. It's not where that book was going, but I had a separate genealogy project. And I ended up discovering that my great-grandfather, who we always thought came from Canada, and I could never figure out why he'd come from Canada back to the US. He came from Canada, Virginia. a town that has been covered over by the University of Virginia's South Lawn. It was a town of free Black people that they built a hall to obscure because they hated seeing free Black people that close to the university. And my family's history is one of mobility, right? They were originally from Louisiana and South Carolina and all of these places, and they ended up in Chicago. And they never wanted to talk about it. And I am not good at taking no for an answer, so I wanted to know why. The answer involves a story that includes the words, well, after they killed those 3 white men, they had to change their names and move, right? They had to do that because lynchings and land theft. And I had been getting annoyed increasingly by the narrative of some young millennial white people that their boomers had taken all the money they were supposed to have. And that was what the book was going to partially be about. And then I started comparing the dates and the notes, and I realized that it's not the boomers, right? I mean, they took some money, but it wasn't the boomers. It was Silent Gen and Greatest Gen and every other part of Jim Crow. It wasn't just what they took from Black families. It was what they took from Indigenous families. It was what they took from Asian families. It was what they took from Latino families. And that generational theft isn't possible anymore. And the money's run out. That's the book. I'm working on it. Don't ask. However, in the throes of putting this together, I've been working with an editor that I know really well. And she's left editing for a while. So now I have to find a new editor. Same imprint, new editor. And when I tell you, some part of me was like, I have to explain this to white people? My editor was Black. She already understood. I got to start over with a white woman? It was a moment. It was a turn. But I got nervous. I got nervous about how people are going to receive it. I get nervous about a lot of things. I generally don't live in fear. Some years ago, after I wrote about having a medically necessary abortion, I was targeted for a really long time by a bunch of far right-wing anti-abortion folks. One of them, whose name I don't say in public because I won't give her any attention otherwise, had testified in front of Congress that hospitals were throwing away babies. Yeah, no, can't explain any of that part. But she had told a story to Congress about finding a baby crawling in a room by itself, an aborted baby, right? It's real wacky stuff. At any rate, I got a bunch of death threats. I got a lot of like, here's a picture of you taken through a scope kinds of death threats. And that cured me of something, right? If it's my time, it's my time. But all the other fears, what you gonna do? You don't buy the book. You get mad at me and yell about me on the internet, whatever. The only thing I fear at this point is that something happens to me and it upsets my family. Other than that, I worry about them. I occasionally explain to my oldest is trans, and she would like to put mommy in a bubble. And she does not want to be in a bubble, and we are duking that out right now. Because I feel like my job is for you to go in a bubble. I don't know what she's thinking. She's 22. She thinks she's grown. I don't know who lied to her. Yeah. She's got a bachelor's degree, but still. But that has been a thing that I worry about more so than anything else. Because once enough people tell you they want to kill you, okay. I've survived worse. And also, quite literally, at this point, it is what it is. I will have done what I came to do, right? I want this book to come out. I want people to read it. I fully expect people to hate it, but I also thought they were going to hate his feminism, so pay no attention to that part of the speech.
Thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
If there's nobody else, I'll go again. Could you talk a little bit about, I've just been so inspired by so many different things you do. Could you talk a little bit about your writing productivity? I mean, you're very prolific at saying things that you know folk don't want to hear. And I'm just awed by that because I think many of us allow that to stop us, or we censor ourselves before people can hate what we're doing. I'm just curious as if there's any tips or strategies that you have around when you feel like your calling is to say or do things that make people feel uncomfortable. I'm wondering if there's anything that you could share about that process.
So, full disclosure, I, as a personal choice, have chosen to only care about the responses of people I care about to my work, right? And by that, I don't just mean people in my house or my friends, but I mean that when angry, I don't know, I have this thing where like weird white supremacist bot accounts and like incel accounts will like attempt to brigade. And they all say the same thing, right? And I've just decided not to care about those people or the people who support those people, right? And once I gave myself permission not to care about how they felt or what they thought or how they were going to react, it's much easier to accept that someone might have a genuine critique or a back and forth or a dialogue about what you say. And now, other full disclosure, I have ADD and I have insomnia. So I write at the strangest hours of the night and times. Sometimes I am writing without being in front of a computer and let my brain do the work while I do something else. Sometimes I will churn out 4,000 or 5,000 words and then go take a nap, right? I take a walk and I'm writing in the back of my brain. For me personally, sitting at a blank screen when there's nothing in there that needs to come out is useless. So I only sit down when it's ready to go. And those spurts are sometimes really long, right? So sometimes he opens my office door, food, water, feed and water your writers. Very important. There's a running joke that my kids will throw a blanket over my head when they're like, yeah, Mom, you've been awake enough hours now. But once I gave myself permission to not look at the comments, not to worry about people being mad, whatever, I just said it, right? I put it out in the world and their response to it is none of my business. Unless they have a genuine criticism, I got something wrong. Your feelings about my work are your business, right? I'm never going to be that writer that tries to hunt you down to argue with you about a review or whatever. And I know people do things like that. I don't expect people to love everything I say. And I think sometimes we get so hung up on the idea that we have loved this thing so much everyone else must love it, that we think it's like our baby. And sometimes what we produce is an ugly baby. It just is. But it's also something that once we have given it to the world, it belongs to the world, right? And when you let it go and move on to the next one, it's also much easier, right? So if you spend 2 years working on the exact same paragraph, you can't bear any criticism from that paragraph. I spend one night. Like, we'll re-edit, right? But I don't edit as I go anymore. That used to be my trap. I would get stuck on picking the exact right words in the exact right order. These days, I just puke words on a page. It's the only way to describe it. I know it's not the prettiest image, but if you were to see me writing, we were in a document. He was looking at something, and then he's watching me in the document. And he was like, it was crazy because I was trying to read it, and then like, it's just moving. How do you do that? And I'm like, writing now, go away. Okay, right? It's a magical world in my house when I'm writing because food just pops itself down in front of me. So do liquids. I think he thinks that I'm like a pet, though. No. And it turns out that you're gonna have to edit it, right? 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Hood Feminism went through, I think, 7 rounds of edits between me and making my friends read it before I turned it in, and then actual editing and copy editing and yada, yada. And so don't expect it to be perfect when you first write it out. Expect it to go back and forth between you and your editor or whoever a couple of times. not only because you'll know what's in your head. They will have questions that should be on the page, right? The editor that is leaving, she had me explain like how food stamps and stuff work. In part, some of the reasons some of the stuff is in the book is because she reminded me, people reading this won't have your experience, right? So she makes me put the words on the page. Okay, great. But also, as I read my own edited work, stuff I had written in that first Fury, I didn't like it, or I wanted to reshape it or whatever. If I'm gonna noodle over it endlessly for 3 weeks, it might as well be after all the words on the page are there and I am shaping that, as opposed to trying to pick the exact right word when I don't even know where I'm going yet. Also, some of the best pieces I've written have turned around in very short periods of time. When I wrote that piece for Eater about Beyonce and Jim Crow and hot sauce, and I won an award for that. I pitched that piece on like a Monday, wrote it, I think that Tuesday, we did edits on Wednesday, it ran, I think that Thursday or Friday, right? Because the other thing is that sometimes you will obsess so much, it's kind of like making soup, right? It's not just too many cooks can spoil the broth, too many spices. You will be, I don't know, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, and what you've made is mud. What you've made is a mess.
Great. We'll take one last question, and it's been great dialogue. One last question.
There's
Yeah.
two
If
people.
nobody.
Let's take two.
Okay, two. Okay, yes.
Yeah,
Well, as many, yeah. But
Okay.
Or why not?
Whoever hasn't gone, they can go first.
yeah,
Oh, okay. All right. My question is, with the state of the current world, and as you mentioned before, you are a historian or are a historian. How do you encourage Black communities to build community, like across everything, whether it be personal, whether it be at work? What are some of your tips for building that and maintaining that community?
We have to be kinder to each other. We have to be willing to be wrong and then forgive each other, right? And I mean, forgive others as you would forgive yourself, forgive each other. Because we don't really know enough about each other's communities. I genuinely say this. Because what happens, unfortunately, is that it's very easy to get isolated and siloed, even in terms of Black communities in the same city, never mind across the diaspora. And like, we were talking about the West Side and the South Side. I know every single neighborhood on the South Side because that's where I grew up. I can remember most of the neighborhoods on the West Side, but I'm a lifelong Chicago resident and I'm still standing there going, the one south of North Lawndale, but north of Auburn Gresham. Well, that's back of the yard. My brain puked it out. So one of the things about building community is to realize we have more in common than we have that is different. And then to respect the things that are different, because we all have different histories, different experiences. And one of the hardest parts of that sometimes is that we will have old wounds, old slights, old insults, old whatever, and we're still carrying it. And I said a thing on Twitter that wasn't very popular. Someone had brought up African Americans saying xenophobic things. And I was saying, I really wish we could let go of the things that are said in school. And I mean that. But I mean that also for African Americans who were told they talked white, or that they wore the wrong clothes, or any of the other things children say to each other that are awful, because white supremacy influences our kids more than we ever realize. And then in terms of other communities, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about missing and murdered Black women and missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have the same problems. They may manifest in different ways, but just like Black communities are seeing attempts to take their kids, the Indian Child Welfare Act is under attack in Texas and elsewhere. In terms of violence, currently, a white man was just arrested for attacking 7 Asian women in New York in, I think, under an hour. It's not that different from anything that has happened to Black girls in America or Indigenous women in America, right? So we have more in common than we have dividing us. And this is even true to some degree for white women, because a lot of low-income white women are experiencing the same world that Black and Indigenous and Islamic and Asian, and you know what I'm saying? Like they're experiencing the same world because they don't have money or they don't have a presentation that affords them protection. There's sort of a perception that white women are all being protected. That's actually like a really small group, and I'm not too sure about the phrase protected there, right? We're currently watching, frankly, Kanye appear to stalk Kim Kardashian live and in color. And she's got security and she should probably be fine. But the response is telling me that, oh, wait, no, she's on the wrong line, the wrong side of the line for protected, right? And she's rich, she's famous, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not really sure at this point where the line is that protection exists. And with that in mind, I think sometimes when your community is under attack, it is easy to feel like the other communities that are maybe complicit know what they're doing, know how much harm they're doing, but they've never talked to you. They've only seen what white supremacy exports about you. And you've never talked to them. You've only seen what white supremacy imports about them. So sometimes I think building requires those hard conversations outside of whiteness and absolutely between communities, and being forgiving, being willing to hear that you're wrong and also to say, hey, no, that's not cool and here's why. It's not going to be easy, but that's where I think colleges really come into play, because that's where these groups are most likely to be gathered, most likely to interact organically in a place where people are young enough to not be quite so set in their ways yet, hopefully. Does that make sense outside of my brain? Okay.
My question is, you've mentioned your family several times. So how impactful has your partner, has your family been in your process and throughout your journey?
I couldn't have done it without them. It's a funny thing. When I've won awards or done well, something has been popular, I will say, oh, hey, this happened. And my oldest has this thing where she looks at me and she's like, yeah. Duh. Right? And you would think she's just being rude, but she's like, no, I knew you were going to be fine. Right? My youngest has adopted a policy of mom looks sleepy, mom looks hungry, mom looks. And I'm like, I'm supposed to take care of you. And they're like, and you do, but also, right? My poor partner. We've been together a really long time, and I might perhaps have very strong opinions about his health. Maybe. Very, very verbose opinions. And he's just like, hypocrite. When was the last time you ate a full meal, right? But they also listen to me when I have things to read. He comes with me to events. We are a team. Right? We even, like things as mundane as like house cleaning and whatever, we do those things together. There's no like, you are assigned this role based on your gender, you are assigned. All those snowstorms, I had to shovel too. And he told me, you don't have to come out and shovel, you can stay in. And I could have. He would have shoveled without me. But I had just seen a story about somebody 45 having a heart attack while shoveling. And so he had to deal with the fact that I was not gonna let him be outside by himself. And that is just how this works. We are a family. We are a team. We show up for each other every day. Thank you all for coming. It's nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, that concludes our second part of our distinguished speaker series that's been funded by Amazon. I want to thank my colleague Will Davis, who helped set this up, and all the people that helped me from digital media and design to university events, all the people here. Thank you for you being in community with Mikki and welcoming her to GSU and asking her profound questions. And Mikki, thank you for sharing your story as part of Women's History Month. And we look forward to our final speaker, will be Dr. Juan Gilbert, who will be talking about STEM DEI initiatives, which are very important as far as our upcoming in our economy and lifting us up as far as all Illinois. So thank you very much, and let's converse and break bread. And thank you so much for your time.